I think about, and I've shared this once before, a situation with my uncle. My uncle worked for the Transit Authority in New York, and he talked about a conversation he had with a Japanese coworker. And this is probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. Because I asked him when, he said sometime around the late 50s, early 60s. He said this Japanese man came in, he worked with him in the, for Metropolitan Transit Authority. He used to do carpentry, repairing the trains, the subways. And this man would basically keep to himself. He would just come in and bring his lunch, and he would sit down and eat. And, he might nod or something to people, but he kept to himself. And this continued for some time. And then one day, my uncle, who was a member of the Moorish Science Temple, had understanding about the Moorish legacy, was talking to some brothers who worked with him, and laid it out. Sounded, I imagine, probably a lot like I sound in terms of sharing historical information and talking about context and everything else. And when he finished, he said that he sat down to eat, and this Japanese man got up from his table, which was a little further down, came over, bowed. He said, "Now we can talk." Amnesiatic, right? Subjugated or oppressed. This idea of people not knowing, which results in many people who do know, not wanting to associate with us. Because as they say, we don't know how to act. And it's like, look, I don't know what I can trust you with in terms of talking with you. Or I don't know what you're going to do, because you may have no honor because you don't know who you are. If you know who you are, you clearly have honor. If you know who you are, that's why, just as a sidebar for a minute, a sister or brother who really does their best to live according to the principles of the Christ, I ain't got nothing but love for them, right? I'm saying those who live the principles, because that's someone who essentially, has some honor and is trying to do the best they can to make a better world. That's not to be confused with folks who go to church, but ain't nothing seeping in with regard to that. In fact, a lot of times people's focus now is on, what do they call it? Prosperity gospel. That's good, that's well, but you also have to teach something about the ethical foundations of what the Christ was conveying. Because prosperity without ethics is an accident happening, not even waiting to happen. So that experience with my uncle, I think, is just a good example of what I'm saying in terms of a more contemporary and 20th century manifestation. And I myself have had experiences where people from other countries, when they heard me talking about Moorish history and identifying myself as Moorish, even as I also emphasized that my father's from Cuba, said, "Why is your name?" Look, I'm not denying the nationality of my father. What I'm simply saying, you can be Cuban and Moorish too. I'm pointing out that Moorish, in terms of, this is a reference to what was once the old imperial boundaries of the Moorish Empire. Even the name Cuba is a Maghreb Arabic term for place of sanctuary. So, and is that by accident? Right, and that's why it's not Cuba, it's Cuba. Koubba would be the proper spelling. So they're even telling you, when Columbus went to Cuba, he's on the Oriente, he's on the eastern coast. Clyde Ahmed Winters, who's a historian, talks about looking through the Spanish sources and seeing in Columbus's journey account that he claimed to see minarets on the eastern coast of Cuba. That's Columbus when he's coming into the area on board the ship. So, is that a shock? So, the minarets are like a steeple on a church. Mosques have minarets. So, to see this, if anybody would know what a minaret looked like, it would be some Spaniards on a ship in 1492, right? So, based upon, like I said, Clyde Ahmad Winter's work that was in, and he quotes people like P.V. Ramos, and I think that was in African Presence in Early America, I think is where he had written that article. Because it's in concert with, and that's an edited work by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. So it's actually Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book. So this is telling us even about those connections, right? Brazilian Muslims that people often don't make reference to, which were part of these religious groups that brought different people of African ancestry together. So people practicing traditional, if you will, African spiritual systems. And then you had people who were practicing an African interpretation of Islam that goes back to the marabouts. And in fact, there are names, Maravitinas, Marabillos, which are Native American surnames. How do you get a Native American surname, Marabillos and Maravitinas? These are all derivations of Marabout. Even Moabite, which was a term used also for the people in the 11th and 12th century who were in, where? Al-Andalus. So you have the Spanish Catholics referring to these people as Moabita, who are also known as the Almoravids. So someone's going to tell me that, you see what I mean? Where the emphasis on trying to be quote unquote Orthodox or Sunni will often shut down people's willingness to say, well, wait a minute, let me look at these other expressions of Islam. Now, like I said, I have nothing against someone who chooses to practice the orthodoxy, whether it's Sunni or whatever. But the point is, don't negate the value of what is contained in looking at the history of the Murids or the Marabouts and its connection to Moorish science teachings and its connections to Sufi tradition. Because what you do is, you should know better, right? The scholar is, the pen of the scholar is mightier than the sword. So the idea of saying, look, I'm about truth. Allah is not going to be angry with me for seeking truth. That's what I'm supposed to do. Right? So when people get all bent out of shape because they're questioning things, if questioning it is for the purpose of producing something that is destructive, there's a problem. But there's nothing destructive in Moorish science based upon what Drew Ali is talking about. How can you be upset with principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice? I'm trying to figure out what people are talking about, right? And if you're saying that you see the importance of recognizing your connection to your Creator, what is wrong with that?